annotated bibliography, you'll first start with the citation in MLA format. The second, third, or fourth lines are indented. The first paragraph is going to be a summary of the source in your own words. So yes, you do need to read the actual article. Copying and pasting the abstract into the annotated bibliography and just doing a summary or a paraphrase of the abstract would be considered plagiarism. So you do need to read the article. Let's take a look at the rubric to see what's expected for an annotated bibliography and its summary. So the summary must provide sufficient context and details for those who have never read the article. In fact, I haven't read any of these articles that my students have written about. So the summary has to stand alone. There needs to be enough context, so central concepts, definitions, terms need to be defined. Also, it needs to have a coherent beginning, middle, and end. And the conclusion of a summary always concludes with the author's takeaway point or the significance of that takeaway point. In other words, why should the audience care or matter about this issue? Now, you are summarizing the author's point about that, not your opinion. You want to keep your opinion out of the summaries. Let's take a look at an ineffective summary. In the very beginning of this summary, he writes, the United States militarization of police is a systemic phenomenon mostly attributed to the Pentagon's program, Section 1033 of the 1997 National Defense Authorization Act. Over time, police departments have gained the armaments, training, legal framework, surveillance, equipment, and the recruitment tactics of the military. Excellent. Okay, so I assume I'm going to be learning more about this training, how it's changed, about the legal frameworks, how that's changed, the surveillance equipment, and the recruitment tactics of the military. I'm assuming I'm going to learn about how the police adopted that and why. Okay, so that's the question, or those are the questions that are raised. And we continue. Although militarization as a trend started to grow in the years leading up to the new century, it has increased exponentially post 9/11. Police in the U.S. not only adopted many of the military's weapons, training, and former members of the military due to the Section 1033 program of the Department of Defense, the use of counterterrorism rationale for paramilitary policing was also co-opted as justification for the impact of police militarization on the communities they operate in. And so here, there's a few gaps in the story. Talk more specifically about how 9/11 directly impacted the militarization of the police. Why did they need all of these extra weapons? What were they doing in the spirit of 9/11? Any other legal frameworks or surveillance, those things that were mentioned prior, where is that in this explanation? And last, he talks about the impact of police militarization. What is that impact? That's not fully explained. And so if we understand what that impact is, I'm guessing that's why this argument matters, why this issue is important for readers. Let's take a look at his second summary. For this particular source, he starts off with, a study of 702 American adults across the country examines if individuals believe police are militarized, and it tries to measure the practices police adopt to arm police officers. So right off the bat, this is a study. And when you are writing about a study, you need to follow the genre of a summary study. So this is what it looks like. In the first sentence or first couple of sentences, a summary of a study will provide an introduction of the issue or problem. So with this particular summary, it starts off with, the growth and popularity of the World Wide Web has dramatically changed the way undergraduate students conduct information searches. The next part of the summary tends to talk about the purpose or the aim of the study, so why it was taken place, so why it's addressing this issue. So here we have the purpose of the study is to investigate what core quality criteria undergraduate students use to evaluate web resources for their class papers and to what extent they evaluate the resources. Now, the very next sentence, or again, this can happen in groups of sentences, so it doesn't have to be one sentence. But this is when the writer will summarize the methodology. And so in this case, it reports on the evaluation of 5 web pages as well as a questionnaire of 35 undergraduates. Okay, so we always get the context, how many participants, exactly which instruments were used. And then that's always followed up with a phrase like results show that or findings show that. Okay, so again, when you do a summary of a study, we always are using this language, and you can copy this language. There's nothing special about this language. This is what members of this discourse community use over and over again to summarize studies. And then there's going to be a shift where they talk about the significance of the finding, and they'll say something like, this research suggests that, or these results are significant because. Okay, so nothing creative about the writing, it just spells it out. And again, you got to think about a bunch of physicists and chemists and social scientists. They do these studies all the time, and they just want the facts. And that final sentence, again, is talking about why we should care about these results. Let's take a look at the student sample. So in his very first sentence, he talks about 700 American adults across the study examines if individuals believe police are too militarized. So I believe this is supposed to be the issue that's being discussed. And there could be, with this summary, a sentence or two prior that explores this issue further. And then we can get the actual purpose or aim. So with concept based in legal socialization, literature, legitimacy, and legal cynicism, this study investigates whether or not these constructs. So this is the purpose, right? So this is what the study is trying to do. Okay, so that's not too bad, but we don't know what these concepts are. So that's kind of problematic. A summary needs to provide enough context where we don't need to read the original source. Using least squares regression models to analyze the relationship. So here, this is where the student is summarizing the methodology. And again, the last sentence needs to be a concluding sentence about why this research matters. So he writes, concluding that perceptions of militarization are influenced by legal socialization. Again, we don't even know yet what this exactly is, so this hasn't been clarified, and we don't know why these results matter. So that's also a problem. To revise this summary, the student could elaborate on some of these concepts, and then also, again, talk about why these results matter. In the reflection part of the annotated bibliography, what you want to do is treat it like a journal entry where you are thinking about this source and talking about the ways that it's trying to answer your question. You're also thinking about the ways that this source connects with the other sources, right? So what's the common ground? And I want you to do is use it as a space to actually think about these things, not as just a checkbox trying to meet the assignment. All researchers and scholars keep writing journals while they're doing research, and it's in these journals where they figure out and make sense of the research and how the research connects to each other and how it supports or advances their thinking. And so I want you to use that second paragraph in that fashion, and then also talk about how the source addresses your question, right? So not just, yes, it addresses the question, but how does it do that? Also, does it offer a different perspective? There's anything you agree or disagree with, any piece of evidence that bothered you, anything else that you would want to know more about. So actually write those follow-up questions. Now, again, the second paragraph is not like a report where you have to check off these 3 things. These questions are here to guide you with writing that. So the second paragraph will vary depending on the source. And so with this one, I was satisfied with Kubrin's explanation about the possible role neighborhoods played in ex-convicts reoffending and returning to jail. However, I wish it delved further into more information regarding why neighborhoods play a larger role. Is he referring to specific gangs, families, or community businesses or organizations that lead to recidivism? So here the student is just interacting and talking with the source. And I get how gang rivalries and the drug trade can contribute to recidivism, but what role do families play? Again, it's her voice just talking about the source, trying to make sense of it. You can relate personal experiences as well. Again, you can agree or disagree. And here she is making connections between sources, right? Comparing another source with this one. Same here where she talks about how they're different, okay? So this is what I would like to see in the reflection paragraph. And let's take a look at one that doesn't do such a good job. So here we have the author addresses the causes and effects of police militarization by first arguing the ethos and then going to sort of say police with the capital means supplying support to police. So some of this information is actually information that the summary could have benefited from that's missing in the actual summary. And so you don't want to use the reflection to actually just restate the actual summary or do a better job with the summary. Now, the writer does do a good job here, and while the author did give an example of weaponization and as a means to enact race fear-driven based violence against a black woman, I'm like, oh, that was in the source? Like, you didn't mention that. So here, so much information is missing from the summary, and it's actually popping up in the second paragraph. And so that's not the role of the second paragraph. It's not to just give more summary. It's actually to reflect on what the summary is saying. You could mention like, okay, there was one piece of information, one piece of evidence about a black woman, right? So you could do that, but we had various questions with the summary already. And so to have that pop up here, like maybe that could have benefited better the actual summary. But we do see some nice thinking here about what the student believed and so forth. So there's some good reflective writing happening here. We see that same problem happen with the second source. This study shows the effects of police militarization has had on public perception. I'm like, oh, it did? Like this was about public perception? I didn't know that's what it was about, right? So again, information in this reflection would have benefited the summary. More specifically, with whom and why they hold such perception. Oh, what were those? Why did they hold those perceptions? That would have benefited the summary as well. And then he says he has anecdotal experience, but what is that anecdotal experience? Okay, so when you guys peer review each other's annotated bibliographies, I want you guys to focus on where those gaps are in the summary. And if you notice that they're doing a research study summary, then are they following this format in terms of overview of the issue, the purpose or aim of the study, an overview of the methods, the actual study that took place, and then the results, and then why the study matters, why the results are important. And then for the reflection, is the writer actually elaborating on his thoughts, on his personal experiences, or on the connections between the sources? Or is he just providing more summative information that could have benefited the actual summary? These are the issues that I would like for you guys to focus on when you guys peer review each other's writing. And then, of course, an additional element is if you notice any errors with their citation, you can also point that out. But to receive full credit for the peer review, do leave comments on each summary as well as each reflection.